So a while ago, Trump put out a presidential directive on the NSPM 7, which was a directive to the FBI and other federal policing agencies for guidelines on how to deal with America's enemies, domestic terrorists, and the likewise. The memorandum essentially said, fuck you, everyone die. While it does not create any new laws because the president doesn't have the authority to do that, it does direct the FBI and other federal policing agencies to hunt down certain groups with the assumption that they're engaging in terroristic activities, which opens them up to a wider range of surveilling technologies. Just the other day, Trump put out another message on America's anti-terrorism or counterterrorism strategy. Here's Sebastian Gorka, our counterterrorism czar, which was, in the words of The Guardian, largely slop. It's mostly just waste. It's bullshit. It doesn't mean anything or do anything, but it does signal intent, and intent is important when you're dealing with, Epsteinites. The at times bizarre 16-page memo Gorka authored is only slightly more subtle, taking rhetorically charged swings at the president's enemies, the Biden admin, transgender people, and some Islamist groups. So here's the directive, or not really directive, I guess. It's the strategy paper. Here we got in the bold, the 22-point font so the boomers can read it, So the presidential foreword. We'll read this part, okay? This is the part Trump wrote, or is alleged to have written. When I returned to the White House on January 20th, 2025, 4 years of weakness, failure, surrender, and humiliation. I'm bored. I'm bored already. I'm bored. Okay. Terrorism, blah, 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 blah. Midnight Hammer, Epic Fury, Iran, war with Iran, always war with Iran, nuclear weapons, etc., etc. Nicolas Maduro, jihadist cartel governments who support them. Terrorists of any kind will not be allowed to find safe harbor here at home or attack us from abroad. And then the final paragraph, and this is the good one. Our new U.S. counterterrorism strategy is a return to common sense and peace through strength. As I said, after our first successful counterterrorism mission, just days after I was sworn back into office, if you hurt Americans or are planning to hurt Americans, quote, we will find you and we will kill you. Straightforward. We love a president who takes bold, decisive action. So, yeah, pretty much on the table there. Then we have Trump's signature, very recognizable, always in Sharpie. What, when I saw this on Twitter, I thought it was a meme? You're naive. And now we get the Gorka part. Good versus bad counterterrorism. Very good. So the problem here, and I've alluded to this in my YouTube stream title, which says, let me just go check it. Let me check that. 1 second. What does it say exactly? Do I remember? No, of course I don't. I don't remember a damn thing. What's my name? Who knows? Trump threatens death for pro-trans activists. That is what I typed. Let's find out how accurate that is. So, in this national security strategy document, currently we face 3 major types of terror groups: narco-terrorists and transnational gangs, legacy Islamist terrorists, and violent left-wing extremists, including anarchists and anti-fascists. Our counterterrorism strategy and our CT principles. Not CBT, CT. Keep your mind out of the gutter. Okay? All right? Flooding of our communities with deadly drugs at the hands of foreign narco-terrorists or violent left-wing extremists who have adopted radical ideologies antithetical to the principles upon which our republic was founded. So it's important to understand categorization here. Specifically, in addition to cartels and Islamist terror groups, our national CT activities will prioritize the rapid identification and neutralization of violent secular political groups whose ideology is anti-American, radically pro-transgender, and anarchist. So the document specifically names anti-American and pro-transgender and anarchist groups as being part of the group of people that Trump says we will find you and we will kill you about. That's why I named it like that in the YouTube title. That's why I named it like that. We will use all the tools constitutionally available to us to map them at home, identify their membership, map their ties to international organizations like Antifa, and use law enforcement tools to cripple them operationally before they can maim or kill the innocent. They won't use shit. Like I said when we were talking about the NSPM 7, it's important to understand what exactly this document is and what it can do. The president can't create new laws. That's Congress. I understand we live in a lawless era, but this is a really important distinction to make, because if you were arrested under charges of violating a new made-up law the president made, it would go to the courts, and the court would be like, what? What is this? What? No. Like, a judge and a prosecutor would be like, how do we charge this? It's literally not a law. It's not in the legal code. Like, Trump can say this is now illegal. That doesn't add it to the legal code. There's not really anything to charge with, you know? So no new laws are being created here. What this does mean is that federal police are expanding their definitions to include people in these categories as suspected domestic terrorists, and are thereby expanding the range of surveillance methods and prosecutorial tactics that they can use against people that they can rope into these groups. You understand? They're not creating a new crime, making it against the law to be trans or pro-trans or anarchist or whatever else. What they're doing is saying that if you belong to those groups, you are suspected of being a domestic terrorist, and the federal government has the legal right to, say, engage in warrantless wiretapping or other forms of surveillance that they reserve specifically for people they suspect of domestic terrorism. It is Stasi behavior. Now, thankfully, unlike the Stasi or the NKVD or whatever else, there are no laws they can use to back this up with when it comes to prosecutions. So it doesn't mean convictions. It can mean they can ruin your life, though, which is bad. You know, the federal government is still capable of ruining your life here, even if none of their charges stick. They can legally harass you, they can sanction you, they can destroy your association with existing organizations, they can defund NGOs, they can do basically everything they want against you outside of the very specific, legal charges. If you do anything illegal, it makes it a lot easier for them to catch. So I hope you're not seeding your torrents. They can make sure you don't find work. Yes, that too. Yeah, you can be blacklisted, da-di-da-di-da, Goals of our counterterrorism strategy. The mission of the counterterrorism structures of the U.S. government is to identify those groups that have the intent and capability to plot attacks against Americans and then neutralize them. This mission can be broken down into 3 simple functions. Identify terror actors and plots before they happen, cut off their arms, funding, and recruiting streams, ultimately destroy established threat groups. Da-di-da. A lot of this is incoherent, and it's just, it's not even legal babble. It's politically partisan nonsense. But it does signal intent. I should probably tell my trans friends about this document. Yeah, probably. It is worth noting, though, that this particular fascist government that we live under is unique in the sense that fascist governments have historically sought to embolden the power of the federal government to expand it, whereas in this case, they are gutting the federal government. In traditional fascist regimes, eventually the power of the corporations were folded into the apparatus of the state. In this case, the opposite is happening. The power of the state is being dissolved and folded into the power of private corporations. More and more power in government is being given to private corporations, which is actually disempowering the government in its ability to use itself to prosecute its enemies. It can't make new laws. It's not properly funding federal police like the FBI. It's a bad strategy for governance, in case you were wondering whether or not these people are competent. Do you think we should take this document too seriously, given how the Fed is weakening, as you put it? Well, think of it like a death threat being issued by a homeless person. How seriously you take it is up to you. I wouldn't take it fully seriously. I'd take it at least some amount of seriously. I'd be concerned. I probably wouldn't walk, the same path home, I guess, if they were known to stake out that spot. You're not entirely wrong, Benjamin. So far, the government has not been successful in really using this strategy. The only thing that I can think of that's close is that anarchist group they went after recently. You recall? It was a group of a dozen or so young people who went and what were they doing? They wanted to fire fireworks at a federal government, at an ICE building, but then they ended up bringing a gun and shooting at a cop. So the reason they were able to be prosecuted for terror charges was because they shot at a cop, and they did so as part of a intentional political scheme to do damage to federal property for reasons, So, the only reason they were brought up on those charges was because they were already engaging in extremely illegal behavior that is at least adjacent to terroristic activity. Political protest where they bring weapons with the intent of doing harm to agents of the government, that will get you charges. But so far, the government has not yet gone after anyone who fits this mold in the way you might think they would. Though that doesn't necessarily mean that doesn't necessarily mean they won't in the future. U.S. intelligence has also driven people into doing something illegal, like after 9/11. Yeah, one thing you should be really concerned about right now, for one, don't do illegal stuff. For two, I mean it. For two, don't get goaded into doing illegal stuff by Fed posters online. There's a reason we've always had a strict no Fed posting rule. It's because, the term comes from Fed posting, like federal agents trying to bait you into engaging in behavior that allows them to rack up prosecutions. After 9/11, the government was really intent on proving that it could stop those dirty Muslims from doing something like that again. So the FBI went on a bunch of phishing schemes trying to convince young Muslims across the country to do illegal things so they could immediately nab them and credit themselves for stopping terrorism. They loved honeypotting. Anyway, yeah, I promise you that you really don't want to go down like that. But undercover feds are bad at being undercover. Yes, but in fairness, you guys are stupid. Also, since they're specifically targeting trans people, and I apologize for being a little bit actually bigoted right now, but newly out trans girls online engage in a degree of credulousness that borders on parody. Sometimes I feel like you guys would sign your life away if you were promised like 1/3 of an apartment room in Seattle. Like sometimes you're a little susceptible. You're a little susceptible, is all I'm saying. So be mindful. Don't use social media. That would be a good idea for a lot of you for a variety of reasons. Okay, but the president threatening genocide still fucked up even if he's too demented to enact it? Well, it's not really threatening genocide, but yes, I understand what you're saying. This is very bad. But I'm not explaining what this is to induce fear or to lead you into either like hardline camp of it's over versus this means nothing. I'm only trying to explain to you what it is. Most people online have a very limited understanding of the role and powers of the federal government, especially the executive. Like, even mainstream media will conflate Trump's executive orders with law. They'll conflate presidential memorandums with law, with executive policy, with executive orders, and it makes it really difficult to follow what's going on. Part of this is because mainstream media is retarded, and part of it is because the media class benefits from your ignorance.